The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect the policies and the position of Now You Know.
Good evening and welcome to Viewpoint. Together with experts and newsmakers, we make sense of the week's biggest issues and stories. I'm Barnaby Lowe. In tonight's conversation, conflict and achievement in Philippine waters. Tensions flare once again between the Philippines and China, as around 200 Chinese vessels have been spotted swarming the Julian Philippine Reef, an area well within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. China claims they're fishing boats, but experts say they're maritime militia. The government has filed a diplomatic protest and has demanded the ships leave. World powers such as the United States, European Union, Australia, and Japan have thrown in their support. Meanwhile, on waters east of the country, Filipino scientist Deo Onda became one of the first humans to reach the third deepest spot on Earth, the Emden Deep. In achieving the feat, he expressed solidarity in fighting for Philippine sovereignty by raising the country's flag and declaring "Atin ito." All right, and tonight we are talking Philippine seas, and one is a little bit on the side of bad news, and the other one is a little bit on the side of good news. And we will start with the tensions that have been flaring in the South China Sea recently. And for that, we are joined by retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Good evening, Justice Carpio.
Yes, good evening, Barnaby. Thank you for inviting me to your program, and good evening to our viewers.
Yes. And later on in the program at around 6:30, we will be joined by Dr. Deo Onda, who is a microbial oceanographer at the UP Marine Science Institute and one of the first humans to be able to get to the Emden Deep, which is the third deepest point on Earth. All right, Justice Carpio, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I'm going to start. Okay, obviously, everyone knows that because of the videos and the photos that we've seen, it is a fact now that there are around 200 Chinese vessels at the Julian Philippine Reef or the Whitsun Reef in the West Philippine Sea. Now, the Chinese embassy says that these are mere fishing vessels which took shelter from bad weather. Do they look like fishing vessels to you?
Well, there's no storm anywhere near that area, so it's incredible that they're taking shelter for an alleged storm that does not exist. Second, they cannot be fishing in that area because that area is our exclusive economic zone. And it's only Filipino fishermen who can fish in our exclusive economic zone because Julian Philippine Reef is just 175 nautical miles from our baseline in Palawan. So it's part of our exclusive economic zone. Only Filipinos can fish there. All the oil, gas, and other natural resources in that area belong exclusively to Filipinos. So it's not believable that
but
they are there.
It doesn't mean that Chinese fishermen haven't been fishing there.
Right? Well, they should not be fishing there. But the ambassador of China said they are there because they are fishing. Well, first of all, they cannot fish there. Secondly, if they are taking shelter from a storm, they would logically go to Mischief Reef, which is just 50 nautical miles away, because Mischief Reef is already built up. It has ports, It has all the facilities to protect them in case of a storm. But they did not go to Mischief Reef. They stayed in Julian Felipe Reef. And they've been there, according to the reports now, since November of 2020. But actually, if you go back to the news, they were there also sometime in February of 2020. So they've been there all of the time. Uh, I do not know why our military just discovered it recently only. Uh, if they subscribe to the satellite images of satellite services of commercial satellite companies, they would have known that at uh, the latest, they would have known that the Chinese were there already since November of 2020.
So they couldn't have been sheltering from bad weather for months. I mean,
Yes, it's
there's no
impossible.
bad weather that persists for months.
That's correct.
Yeah. And what about the I mean, you've seen the appearance of these ships because the videos and the photos have there are some of them that have zoomed in on these vessels. And I mean, and the formation as well, you know, the appearance of these ships and the formation as well of all these 200 vessels, what do they look like to you?
Well, all of these are, of course, obviously very obvious. So they are maritime militia vessels of China because they are still hulled. All of these maritime militia vessels of China are still hulled, double steel hulled, because they're built to ram the ships, fishing vessels of other countries. That's what they've been doing. Secondly, they have satellite communication. Uh, they use the Beidou satellite system of China, so they can communicate with the headquarters of the PLA Navy in Woody Island or in Hainan at any time. So,
Mhm.
and also, they don't care. They're not actually fishing, and they stay there as if they don't care whether they can catch fish or not, because they're actually subsidized by the Chinese government in terms of fuel. They are salaried, just like our maritime, just like our CAFGO, our militia, land militia. They receive a salary. So this and they have been placed also under the command of the PLA Navy. So they are actually part of the chain of command of the PLA Navy.
Mm. All
Uh,
right. So
that's
what
why
do you think is the real?
they, they, they are
Yeah, go
treated
ahead.
as auxiliaries, naval auxiliaries of the PLA Navy. That's how the American Navy treats them, because they shadow also U.S. Navy vessels.
Mhm. Having said that, what do you think is the real intention then of
The real
of all
intention,
these 200 vessels swarming that one area in the West Philippine Sea?
their intention is to secure William Philippe Reef as another uh, Chinese uh, base in the Spratlys. They have to secure, they cannot allow other countries to take over Julian Leaf, because Julian Leaf is very near Mischief Reef, just 15 nautical miles. And they have to protect Mischief Reef because Mischief Reef is their biggest air and naval base. So you have to
Mm.
protect. If you have a big naval base like Mischief Reef, you have to secure the periphery. And this Julian Felipe Reef is very near. So that's
Oh,
it's also just like Ayungin Reef, which is near uh, Mischief Reef. That's why they've been trying to oust BRP Sierra Madre of the Philippines from Ayungin
mm,
Shoal.
mm.
This is all to
So
protect their big near naval base on Mischief
mm.
Reef.
So is this more a 2012 Scarborough Shoal situation or more a 1995 Mischief Reef situation?
Well,
So
it's
just to clarify to our audience, in 2012 Scarborough Shoal, well, they've been there for a while. Correct me if I'm wrong. Since 2012, Justice Carpio. but they haven't built any facility there.
This
While
is more
at the yeah, yes, go ahead.
this is more like Scarborough, because when China seized the Mischief Reef in 1995, there was still no declaration of conduct. The declaration of conduct was signed in 2002 between ASEAN and China. And in that declaration, the parties agreed that they will not inhabit uninhabited features in the South China Sea. That's why when they seized uh, Scarborough Shoal in 2012, they have not put up any structure yet because of that declaration of conduct. But of course, they will break that declaration anytime. Uh, the way I see it, they will eventually build on Scarborough Shoal. So they are seizing also Julian Felipe Reef now, but they are not building yet, because once they built, then they would have thrown away the declaration of conduct. That would mean the end of the negotiations for the code of conduct. That is the significance. They are just taking possession, preventing others from taking possession, but they are not building yet. The
So
same, that it is the same strategy they're using in Pag-asa. They took over Sandy Cay, they seized it. We cannot go to Sandy Cay anymore, which is just 2 nautical miles from Pag-asa. But they have not built on it, because the moment they build on it, then they abandon completely the declaration of conduct, because the declaration of conduct says you cannot build on uninhabited features. But they go around that by just surrounding it, Sandy Cay, with the maritime militia vessels, so that we cannot go there anymore. They are in actual possession, but they have not built on it yet.
so are you
The
saying
same
that for
way
as long as
the same way that
yeah,
they have controlled Scarborough Shoal. They surround it with their maritime militia vessels, but they have not built on it yet.
so are you saying that for as long as the Philippines is in bilateral talks with China on the code of conduct, and ASEAN as a bloc is in multilateral talks with China on the code of conduct, that China will not build on these areas of the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they do not feel that it is time. They do not think it is time to build yet, but
Mm.
they will build. It's they're choosing the time to build, but they are taking possession without building. So they took possession of Scarborough Shoal in 2012 without building, so that they will not violate the declaration of conduct. They took possession of Sandy Cay in 2017, but they are not building because they don't want to violate yet the code of conduct. They're taking possession of Julian Felipe Reef now in 2021, but they're not building yet because they don't want to break the code of conduct yet. But they will, at some point in the future, break the code of conduct, because they need to build permanent military installations on these features. In the case of Sandy Cay, they have to protect Subi Reef, because Subi Reef is just uh, 10 nautical miles from Sandy Cay. That's in
Yeah,
between our Pag-asa and the Subi Reef. They have to
I've I've seen
secure
it up
Sandy
close.
Cay.
Justice, I've seen Subi Reef, their artificial island up close. I went there in 2015,
It's
and
like
there
a
was a
big
lot of
city.
construction. There was a
Yes,
lot of construction.
it looks like a big city. At night, you can see all the lights.
Yes, from Pagasa, you can actually see the construction on their artificial island on Subi Reef from Pagasa, from as far away as Pagasa, because that's how big the
Yes,
construction.
when
Yeah.
I visited Pag-asa uh, in 2013, I think, and when we landed, uh, we could see that from the air, we could see all those structures going up already.
Yeah. All right. So does that mean then that you don't see these Chinese maritime militia vessels, let's call it for what it is, the Chinese Armada. You don't see it leaving Julian Felipe Reef ever.
No, I do not see them leaving. Because once they leave, they're afraid we will go there. It's just like Scarborough Shoal. They will never leave. Although they have not
Mm,
built on it, they will not leave. Because that is how you take possession. How do you invade a feature that is submerged, that is low tide? You can see it only at low tide. At high tide, it's totally submerged. You cannot march an army there. You cannot send tanks to roll over that area. How do you seize? How do you invade uh, a small rock above water at high tide? You invade that by surrounding it with your vessels. And that's exactly what they have done.
mhm. But they will not stop at that, is also what you're
Of course.
saying. Because
Yeah.
Greg Polling of the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, he believes that it is unlikely that China will build another artificial island, especially so close to the Mischief Reef, which is their biggest artificial island right now on the Spratly Island, Spratly area. And so what he says is, and I'll quote, what they need is overwhelming dominance when it comes to the number of vessels in the Spratlys, which is what you said, but he stops there. And he says he doesn't
Well,
see the need for China to build an artificial island.
I'm not so sure of that because China can always put up a structure on stilts. It doesn't
Mm,
have to be an island, but they can build like what they've done in some other areas. Uh, you don't have to build an island, an artificial island, as large as Mischief Reef. It's pointless, but they need to have a permanent presence to protect Mischief Reef. And the permanent presence would mean that they can put structures on stilts. Uh, they have done that.
mm.
It's very easy
So,
to do that for them.
right. So is the threat level the same for the Philippines, whether they just, leave their armada there, their maritime militia, or they put up some structures?
Well, uh, if they put a structure that's really a violation of the Declaration of Conduct, because the Declaration of Conduct says you cannot inhabit uninhabited features. And that means if they put up a structure there, a hexagonal structure, what they've done in other places, that means they are inhabiting it. So they will be very careful, but at some point in time, they will do it uh, because to to possess it by placing their maritime vessels all of the time is not very uh, cost effective, not very efficient, and uh, you have to when the storm comes. Uh, it's not that easy to protect yourself with just vessels anchored there. You need a more robust structure.
Mhm. All right. Well, given that this is now the situation, right? China won't leave. They're going to be there for as long as they can be. Are you satisfied with how the Philippine government is responding to the situation right now? We all know, of course, that the Department of Foreign Affairs has filed a diplomatic protest, which they've done a number of times over the last four years. And the Philippine Navy has sent more what they call this, more of their assets to the area, is what we've been told by the Philippine military. And of course, Philippine President Duterte has met with the Chinese ambassador, but it really isn't clear to me what exactly they talked about and whether or not, or how assertive President Duterte was during that meeting, because all Harry Roque, Secretary Roque said was that the Chinese ambassador claimed that these were just fishing vessels, and that was it.
Well, I'm happy that there was a diplomatic protest, a note verbal filed, because that establishes our legal position. But I think it's not enough. Uh, we should, at the very least, file a case before an UNCLOS tribunal. If we are worried that if we send a Coast Guard vessel there or a Navy ship there, things will escalate and we will be outgunned, then the next best thing is to bring the dispute to a forum where warships do not count, missiles do not count. It's only your legal arguments that count, and that forum is an UNCLOS tribunal. And we cannot lose there because that is our exclusive economic zone. So that's the next step that we should take. If we are brave enough, we should send a Navy ship there and take the risk that it will be attacked by China and then invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty. The US said the Mutual Defense Treaty applies to the South China Sea. And of course, China knows this. So, but the government is not doing any of these two. What you said is that the Navy, the Philippine Navy sent assets there, but it did not send it to that particular area. It just sent it to other areas in the West
Right.
Philippine Sea.
So, but are you saying that we can try to invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty because of the statements that have come out from our Western allies, and in particular the US?
It's very clear that the South China Sea is covered by the treaty. It has been stated a long time ago in the 1970s by Secretary Cyrus Vance that the Pacific Theater, that's a term used in the Mutual Defense Treaty, the Pacific Theater includes the South China Sea. But of course, I would go for a calibrated response. We filed already the arbitration, the diplomatic protest. Then we should now go to arbitration. That's what we should do. But of course, this government will just stop at the diplomatic protest. And that's a big problem there.
Okay, I do have a question on the possibility of filing another case at an international tribunal. But let me just go back to the international support that we are getting now. And you were saying, of course, that with or without this international support, it is the Philippines' right to be able to invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty. But we do see stronger support now from the international community. And I don't know if you are active on, I don't think you're active on Twitter, but I'm sure that you've seen the word war on Twitter between the embassies of these countries, of Japan and Australia, and Canada and the UK and the US and the European Union against the Chinese embassy here in Manila. And so what do you make of this international support, and how should the Philippine government take advantage of this?
There is that international support because there's a ruling. The Hague Tribunal ruled that we have an EEZ in the West Philippine Sea. The 9-dash lines have no legal basis at all. They cannot claim any water or resources of the South China Sea. It is because of the ruling that the Western naval powers are supporting us, because that's the law. Now, we have to use a ruling to get their support for Julian Felipe Reef. A ruling would strengthen their support for us, because this is how we build up support, by getting the law on our side, getting rulings on our side. We will certainly win if we file an arbitration case against China for parking their vessels on Julian Felipe Reef. And there is such a ruling. That's another ruling that the naval powers of the world can invoke in telling China China has to abide by international law. So this is what I call warfare, lawfare rather. This is lawfare, and we are. This is our strength, and we should use this because this is where we are strong.
Actually, that brings me to my question on the possibility of filing another case. It's not completely useless, is what you're saying, is because some people think that, the Philippines did win in 2016, but China continues its aggressiveness in the West Philippine Sea and in the South China Sea. So it's not like that win has stopped China from its activities
But you
in.
can just imagine if there was no ruling, the West would not be going there. The naval powers of the West would not be going to the South China Sea to assert freedom of navigation if there is no ruling. Uh, they would not be supporting us if we had no ruling. Uh, the people have this misconception that the ruling is not being enforced. Every time the US, its allies, UK, France, uh, Japan, every time they sail in the West Philippine Sea and conduct naval drills, they are telling China, this is not your, these are not your waters. These waters are part of the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines in accordance with the ruling of the Hague Tribunal. And because this is an EEZ, we can conduct naval drills here. That is an enforcement of the ruling. And they're doing this, their freedom of navigation operations take place every 45 days. So every 45 days, you have an assertion of the ruling, an enforcement of the ruling by the naval powers of the world. In fact, I've been saying this is the most robust, the strongest enforcement of the ruling because the naval ships of the naval powers of the world go there and tell China, we can conduct naval drills here because this is an exclusive economic zone of a coastal state. In the West Philippine Sea, there is only one coastal state, the Philippines. So they are in fact enforcing the ruling for us. That's why we should encourage them to do that, and we should in fact be joining them.
But
But
the
this
Philippines hasn't joined.
government is not doing that.
Right,
So
in the last
let,
years.
let me be very, let me stress, the ruling is being enforced almost every 45 days, every time there's a freedom of navigation operation by the US and its allies. Because those freedom of navigation operations uh, uh, show that, demonstrate to the world that the West Philippine Sea is an exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, contrary to the claim of China that it is not an exclusive economic zone of the Philippines.
Mhm. Actually, I wonder, Justice Carpio, because this is not the first time that the Philippine military, the Philippine Navy, has said that they're patrolling the West Philippine Sea. So I just wonder, if they're really patrolling the West Philippine Sea, how how could this happen?
Well, they say that they patrol the West Philippine Sea. Uh, I would think that they go there now and then, but what is important is that we join the naval powers of the world in exercising freedom of navigation and our flight in the West Philippine Sea because they are actually enforcing the ruling for us. And we should show our appreciation by joining them. And if we join them, the more naval powers of the world will join. In fact, Germany is thinking of sending their warships to the South China Sea. The Netherlands is also thinking, and of course, Germany, UK, and France just issued a statement a few months ago. For the first time, they said, we support the arbitral ruling. China must comply with the arbitral ruling. So there is a document that the world can rally around. That document is the arbitral ruling. That is what we need if we want to stop China from taking possession of Fulian Felipe Reef.
But you
Strengthen
don't see.
our
Yeah.
legal position.
Yeah, but you don't see the Philippines joining these freedom of navigation operations as well as joint naval exercises during this administration, do you?
Not under this administration. Hopefully, in the next administration.
All right. Okay. I have a well, it's a related question, but a bit unrelated as well, if you may. So Vietnam also objected to the presence of these around 200 Chinese vessels in the Julian Felipe Reef. Um, but of course, because they object to this also means that they're asserting their claim there. Are you concerned? I mean, it's not. It looks like it's not just the Philippines that's asserting its claim there.
Vietnam acknowledges that we have an exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea because they, in fact, support the arbitral ruling. And the arbitral ruling states that beyond the 12 nautical mile territorial sea of all those high tide features in the spread list, beyond that, beyond those territorial sea, is the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. And China and Vietnam agrees with this. Now, in the case of Julian Felipe Reef, this is outside the territorial sea of any high tide feature. Being outside the territorial sea of any high tide feature, this forms part of our exclusive economic zone. So I'm surprised that Vietnam is claiming Julian Felipe Reef when it is a submerged area. It is not a high tide. It is not territory. It is part of our EEZ. It's the same. When the incident happened in Reed Bank, some of their media claimed that it is also part of their uh, uh, waters, but they corrected that eventually because Reed Bank, Recto Bank is totally submerged. It's way, way far from any high tide feature, beyond the territorial sea of any high tide feature. So I hope this is one of the issues that our DFA can clarify
Mhm.
and
So at some
say
level,
clear,
it's concerning.
and we should say clearly what is the status of Julian Felipe Reef. As far as I'm concerned, Julian Felipe Reef is a submerged area. It is not part of the territorial sea of any high tide feature, and under the ruling of the Hague Tribunal, it is part of our EEZ. And we should clarify this so that other countries can take a correct position also, because
Mhm.
Vietnam acknowledges the ruling. It has no complaint about the ruling.
Mm.
But for me, it's inconsistent for them to say that uh, Julian Felipe Reef belongs to them because it is not a territorial sea. It is beyond the territorial sea.
Mm. All right. I hope you will allow me one question on One Sambayan. Just one question,
Yeah, go
if
ahead.
you don't mind. So it's been what a week or more than a week now since you launched the coalition. Are you closer to being able to choose a presidential candidate?
Well, we are working. We are forming chapters in schools, in provinces and municipalities. We are talking to uh, by Zoom to uh, possible coalition partners. So we're doing uh, the work that we should be doing to unite the opposition, and so that we will have only one uh, presidential candidate and vice presidential candidate in 2002.
You because you mentioned, was it you or but somebody in your coalition mentioned four people as possible presidential candidates. Of course, you already said that Manny Pacquiao is not one of the people that you're considering for president. But so Manila Mayor Isko Moreno has said that he's not thinking about um, his plans for 2022 right now. And then Vice President Lenny Robredo has said that he's she's also not thinking about 2022 right now. So that leaves you with Senator Grace Poe.
we are talking to them. It doesn't mean that they are running. We are
Okay.
talking to them so that they can join the coalition and to support only one candidate, that we should not
Mm,
be divided, because if we are united, we will surely win. If we are divided, we will surely lose. And that's the basic premise of the Isambayan. Uh,
mm,
so we're talking to them, and it doesn't mean that they are running if we are talking to them.
mhm, mhm. I see. All right. Okay. That's all the time that we have for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us, retired Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for all your insight and expertise on the West Philippine Sea. All right. Okay. And I think our next guest is already online. Joining us is Dr. Deo Onda, who is a microbial oceanographer from the UP Marine Science Institute. And he is joining us from the DSSV pressure drop. Tama ba, Dr. Onda?
Yeah. Yes, hi Barnaby. Good evening to everyone. Yes, I am actually joining you live from the DSSB pressure drop in the eastern part of the Philippines right now.
That is so cool. That is so cool. And it's really a pleasure to have you on this show, and I wonder as well na meron kang signal dyan. And we were able to do this. And
Yeah,
first of
I think I think it's just a bit delayed, so sorry for that. Bear with
Hindi,
me,
okay
and
lang.
I'm happy to be here.
Okay lang. First of all, I'm curious. Ano ba yung microbial oceanographer? And does and is it because of this
Okay.
your specialty kaya ikaw yung napili na mag-dive to the Emden Deep?
Yeah, so microbial oceanography is a young field in the field of oceanography or the marine sciences. My main interest is really looking at how the ocean movement, the currents, the waves, and other processes are affecting biological entities,
Mhm.
specifically the microorganisms, bacteria, viruses. Um, so what I'm interested with is what are the roles of these very, very small organisms in the different biogeochemical processes in the ocean. So, ganun siya. Pero with your question, was it actually the reason why I got invited? I don't think so. I've been asking the Caladan Oceanic, the organization that actually invited me here, and quote unquote selected me or chose me to represent the Filipinos in this expedition. I've been asking them, how did you come up with my name? I mean, what was the process? Because what happened to me was that I just really received this email one day before the pandemic last year, and they were asking if we can collaborate, to do expedition in the Philippine Trench around August. But every pandemic, so that's how the collaboration started. They asked me if I can collaborate with them. I thought it was just as a scientist, I've also, or we in the MSI have been collaborating also with different international institutions. So I thought this would
Yeah.
just be one of the usual collaborations that I would have. It's funny actually, because this expedition has been delayed 3 times. The first one, it
Okay.
was scheduled around June, and then August, and then November. And then around November, we already decided we're gonna call it off because of the pandemic, and then we still need to get the paperwork. We need to coordinate with the Philippine government, the notification letters. So we need to involve the U.S. Embassy with this because the Caladan Oceanic is a U.S. organization. So maraming kailangan tapusin. So we already called it off around November. But around January this year, I received an email again from Caladan, and they were saying, Deo, let's ditch the idea of collaboration. We just wanted to set the record. We still want to be part of that. And dun ko
Okay.
lang nalaman na, okay, the collaboration is actually to go to the Philippine Trench. I thought it's just surface research. So the process itself, I don't know. I really don't know the process how I got selected, but I'm happy. I don't complain. I don't have any complaints.
So
I'm
hindi
happy
mo
to
alam
actually
na
represent the Filipinos in
hindi
this
mo
way.
alam na historic. Hindi mo alam na historic siya until
No,
January.
no, it's actually yes. Actually, I'm gonna tell you the story now. when I agreed to actually go to the expedition around January, I thought talaga ano pa lang din siya, surface expedition, sea surface expedition. Nag-sink in lang siya around February siguro when they actually when they sent me the papers, they were saying, oh, we need to check for your if you're physically fit to actually go to the sub and then dive to 10 kilometers down. We need to interview you, the preparation process. And I was asking, why do I need to be interviewed? Why do I need to prepare? I'm a marine scientist. I've always been on the ship. I've been leading expeditions in the West Philippine Sea, so this should not be a problem. And then I realized, okay, because I'm going to the sub and then I need to go down with Victor Visconti 10 kilometers down. So, nag-sink in lang siya actually in the past few weeks, and even the thought of it being historic, it was never in my thought, my parents, by the way, did not know that I will come here. I only told a couple of friends and of course my supervisors, my director of the expedition, but no one else knew about it. Lumabas na lang yung balita uh, when we cleared things with the DFA, and then we were free to share the news. No one knew it. No one knew about it.
Pero nung nag-sink in sa'yo na you're going 10 kilometers deep and, it's the third deepest point on Earth, what was running through your mind? How was it? How were you feeling?
Yeah, when I realized that it was actually going to be a deep dive and the deepest dive for a Filipino, and also the first time for the Philippine Trench, I was more excited. I did not worry about possible risks. I was just very excited. I was describing it as a normal day in the job. It's just that this time I will be in a submersible. So I did not think about the implication, the historical significance of it, that it actually history in the making. For me, parang, another day in the job, another experience. So, mas ganon, it's more of the excitement, really.
So nung ginawa mo na siya, was it really just another day in the job? Nung pababa ka na.
No. So the week before the dive itself, we left Guam, and then I was being prepared. I think there were more mental preparations that were needed than physical, kasi I was physically categorized naman as fit to actually go into the expedition. It's really more of the mental preparation. I mean, the limiting factor, which is the submersible that we use, is the only IMO certified commercial submersible, meaning it can actually dive repeatedly in the depths of the oceans with not much effect on the body or the health of the passengers, of both the pilot and the passenger. So it's really, the technology on the submersible is a feat in itself. So I didn't have any worries about it. Parang it's really the mental preparation, because, it's not as you said, it's actually not normal to just go 10,000 kilometers below. And there's not much people who have done that. In a commentary by Dr. Batong Bakal, he actually said that there are more people who had been to the moon in the outer space than the deepest parts of the oceans, or have actually crossed 10,000 meters, right? So, yeah, it's really the mental preparation. So yung part ng mental preparation, hindi nila sa akin sinasabi na, Deo, you'll be going 10,000 kilometers, ganun. It's more of the mind conditioning na, Deo, you'll be on a submersible and it's gonna go somewhere.
Okay.
Dwell on the fact you will be 10,000 meters down there. Yeah.
And nung nakarating ka na talaga sa baba, I know you can't talk about yet what you saw down there. Pero siguro yung feeling na lang, nung tumapak na yung submersible sa 10,000 meters na depth ng Philippine Trench.
Yeah. So, yeah. Actually, the entire trip for me was like a fairy tale book coming into reality. I'm an oceanographer. I teach. Most of what I know about the oceans are based on books. And for me, seeing and experiencing it was like theories and principles of photography coming into life. Ganun siya. Nakikita ko as we go down from the surface, going down, nakikita ko nagde-dissipate yung light, it diminishes. So, andun yung feeling na I'm actually very excited to see. But the best part of the travel itself, the entire thing from the surface to the bottom took around 4 hours. I did not dare close my eyes. So I really enjoyed, and I was very observant the
I
entire time. The
I can
most
imagine.
the most the thing, yeah, the thing forget is the last 15 meters.
Yeah.
So when we crossed the 10,000 mark, Victor Visco was already telling me, Dr. Onda, congratulations, you're the first Filipino to cross 10,000 meters below the sea, blah, 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 blah. And then sabi niya sa akin, oh, let's now prepare for the descent, to reach the bottom. And then on my right side, there's a screen that tells you ano na yung depth na naabot mo and how many meters, far how far you are from the bottom. And those 15 meters were like the longest 15 meters I've traveled. Kasi the bottom, I can describe naman a bit of it. The bottom
Okay.
is, it's been there for millions of years.
Yeah.
And it's the first time that human eyes will be able to makikita yon. So, for me, pumasok na dun yung pumasok na excitement. But the other thing that I remember doing na hindi ko talaga nakalimutan was to get the Philippine flag. The Philippine flag was in my pocket, and then I took it. And then as I went down, hindi ko alam kung bakit, but the flag was in my chest the entire time. And then for me, it's the fulfillment, because I promised this expedition that I will wave that flag when I reach the bottom. And it was really the fulfillment of representing 106 million Filipinos, sabi nga ni Carpio, at the
It's the
bottom
one
of the
thing that
sea,
you planned.
for us to assert
Yeah.
what? Sorry.
It's the one thing that you planned.
Ano yan?
Right. It's the one thing that you planned, right?
Yeah, it is the one thing that I planned. Yes. Yes, yes. So actually, I have the flag with me right now. No?
Ayan.
So, uh, yeah. So
And
I was
this
telling
is
myself at the time, this is a fulfillment of a promise. It is a fulfillment of the promise that I made to the Filipino people. In my own little way, I want them to understand that there is an extension of a marine heritage they have, and that heritage actually belongs to us Filipinos. So, mas yun yung naramdaman kahit men, andun yung happiness, pero andun din yung privilege, and then andun yung honor to actually represent the Filipinos down there. Medyo melodramatic yung kwento. You become emotional when you go there. Eh. It's like going another world. The bottom of the Philippine Trench and the Andean Deep is just like out of this world. It's something that I have not seen in the surface of the earth. It's something that is very new to me, and it's something that is just amazing to see. Yeah.
and it's ours. Sabi mo nga, atin ito.
And it's ours. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. The Andean Deep is ours. Atin ito. Yes.
Yes. Is it more special given what's happening on the other side of the Philippines in the West Philippine Sea right now? I mean, you were, I think, present during the last 10, 15 minutes of my interview with Justice Carpio. And even if you weren't, I'm sure you're aware of what is happening right now in the Julian Felipe Reef. So is it more special given the current events?
Yeah, I've been involved a lot in the marine scientific research activities in the West Philippine Sea. I led an expedition in 2019, and I continue to be vocal about the environmental status of the reefs and the marine habitats we have in the West Philippine Sea. I understand it in such a way that I know the possible implications of the current activities that China has been doing in the area. I've been calling it the four phases of aggression. So I am very much knowledgeable on the situation in the West Philippine Sea. So going to the other side, going to somewhere that nobody has been before and represent the Filipinos on that, it's really extra special. I was always saying that we've already sort of asserted our rights in the West Philippine Sea. We've expanded our reach in the Northeast Philippines with the Philippine Rise. And I think this is another endeavor that will enrich and hopefully spark interest of the Filipinos on the marine environment and the protection of those resources and the assertion of our sovereign rights in this extended heritage we have. So it is actually extra special.
Mhm. So, yun ba yung, kumbaga, those things that you mentioned, yun yung mga goal for going down? Because aside, of course, from making history, I assume that there are scientific goals here, environmental goals.
Yeah,
What is the goal, the main
yeah.
goal? What are the main goals of this expedition?
Yeah, Caledon Oceanic. Its main goal is just really to set records. That's what it's been doing. It has been to the deepest trenches in the five continents. Has
Mm.
repeatedly dived the second and the deepest and the second deepest trenches. So that's what they're to demonstrate that it can be done and that they have the only technology to actually do it. So mas yun
Mm.
talaga yung mas
Okay.
exploration yung orientation ng Caledon Oceanic. But Caledon Oceanic also recognizes the fact that they have this vessel and they have this platform that can do scientific research. But for the expedition in the in the Philippine Trench, we wanted it to be a marine scientific research activity. But for it to happen, we need to get from the Philippine government to give us a MSR permit. But with administrative processes, with the lockdown, we were not able to finish all the papers. So Caledon Oceanic still wanted to do the expedition, but now it is classified to be a non-marine scientific research. So most of the observations that we did were really peripheral. It's not the main goal. The main goal is to visit. Those initial observations, it would spark interest on the part of the government and part of the Filipino people to do more expeditions. Probably not deep sea or in the Indian deep, at least in the area of the Philippine Trench. It's actually Philippine Trench, I would say, is one of the least studied areas in the Philippines. So
Mhm.
yeah, yung idea naman dito is just to initially see what's down there and if there are things that can interest the government, hopefully.
And I'm sure you're excited to talk to your students.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
marami ka rin natutunan, even if
yeah.
it's not really a scientific expedition per se.
Yeah, no, you cannot take the scientist away from me. Sabi nga ng director namin, we are actually scientists to the core. So even though we don't have design experiments for this, ako ang sabi ko nga doon, it's a privilege because when I come back, I will not only be teaching something that just come from the book. I will be
Yeah.
teaching something that I've seen myself, I've experienced myself. And it's a privilege to actually tell that story. If you are an oceanographer in the Philippines, most of the things that we are teaching are actually based on what we know from the North Pacific, from the Atlantic, from the Arctic. Yung mga libro na ginagamit natin were actually written by Western oceanographers. And I think it is one of the few moments in life as a professor myself that I will be able to teach something that just came from our own backyard, and that is actually a beautiful thing to do.
Mhm. And how was it working with Victor Vescovo? Am I saying his name right?
Yeah.
One
Yes,
of the
yes, yes.
greatest adventurers of our time.
Yeah, he is. He is. Sabi ko nga, aside from the privilege of actually going down to the Emden Deep, I had the privilege to be stuck in a very small place with this man for 12 hours. And he is a recognized, world-renowned adventurer and explorer. So I really learned a lot from him about our own lives. We've shared some personal insights. We've shared about his plans after the expeditions. He talked to me. He asked me what are my plans afterwards.
Yeah.
So it was more of like a mentor-mentee discussion down there. And I thought it was a privilege because he is still a successful person and I've learned a lot from that. And I hope what I've learned will also make me a better one. So it was a privilege to actually, and he's one of the humblest most humble person I've met. I mean, I have nothing against the guy. I have nothing against say against something about the privilege to actually work with him and for me to be invited.
Yeah. All right. So you talked about talking to him about what's next for you. What is next for you?
What is next for me? We in a few days we will be going back to Guam, and from Guam I'll be going back to the Philippines. And in the Philippines, we already have schedules to go to the West Philippine Sea. So I led an expedition in 2019 in partnership with the DNR DMB, and we will be continuing that collaboration with the phase two of that program. It's called the Protect WPS. So we will be bringing research on the reefs in the area and then assess some of the damages that have been done and hopefully understand the connectivity and the importance of the offshore reefs in the Spratlys and how they are important to the fisheries in the mainland Philippines, such as in Palawan. The other thing that I actually realized is that I'm given this opportunity, as I've told you earlier, I did not expect that this will gain traction, that it will actually gain the interest of many Filipinos, right? But I'm given this platform now. And I hope to use that platform to still push for my own advocacies for attention to the research and development in the country, assertion of our rights in our waters, and of course, especially of the marine environment.
All right. On that note, thank you very much, Dr. Deo Florence Onda, who is aboard the DSSV pressure drop right now, somewhere along the Philippine Trench, near Siargao yata. Tama ba?
Yes. Yes,
Near
near
Siargao.
Siargao, near Siargao. And lang, give me a few seconds or minutes lang then to also acknowledge the fact that I am not the only Filipino on board. Half of the
Okay.
crew of the
Right.
ship are actually Filipinos. And I think I am honored and privileged to do this, to accomplish this feat with them. Sabi ko nga masyado akong pampered ng mga Pinoy dito eh. Just a trivia, I think when I went down the Emden Deep, the food that I had, the snack that I had was actually pandikoko. And it was prepared to me by the Filipino pastry chef. The night before the dive, there was tinola. So sabi nila para daw matulog ako ng matindi. They cooked tinola. So I share this pride and this honor and the privilege of diving the Emden Deep on behalf of with the Filipino crew on board for the DSSV pressure drop. And I hope that is also a recognition of the Filipino seafarers who are actually
Yes.
manning many vessels around the world amidst the
For sure.
pandemic. So I
Yes.
think we should also share that honor with them. Yeah.
Oh,
And thank you
well,
for that, Barnaby.
yeah. Well, then let's say together, mabuhay ang Pilipinas, mabuhay ang mga Pilipino. 'Di ba?
Mabuhay ang Pilipinas, mabuhay ang mga Pilipino. At atin ito.
Natin ito. Salamat, Dr. Deo Florence Onda.
Yeah.
But before we go,
Maraming salamat.
I would just like to well, I'm not making the announcement, but I'm just relaying the announcement that has just been made by Secretary Harry Roque. Dr. Onda, you might be coming home to ECQ actually. So we are NCR Plus, which is composed of Metro Manila, Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, and Rizal, is going to be under ECQ from March 29th, that is Monday, I believe, to April 4th. And so what that means is that there's going to be a strict regulation of operating industries, and there will be provision of food and essential services, heightened presence of uniformed personnel, and there will be implementation of temporary measures imposing stringent limitations on movement and transport of people. Gatherings of more than 10 persons outside of one's household is prohibited. Gatherings indoor with any persons outside of immediate household, that's prohibited. Curfew is going to be from 6 in the evening to 5 in the morning. Travel pass is not going to be needed. That was needed during the first ECQ back in March 2020. But so that's not needed this time around. And then the malls are not going to be open except for the essential stores. So, for instance, the groceries and the drugstores and hardware stores and restaurants are going to be only for takeout and delivery. I don't see here if there's going to be direct financial aid, but we can update you on that once we get that information. All right. So thank you for joining us in this episode of Viewpoint. Do catch us live here on Now You Know's Facebook page, Twitter page, and YouTube channel every Saturday at 6 in the evening. For updates on our upcoming episodes, please join our Facebook group. Just search for Viewpoint on Now You Know. Again, my name is Barnaby Lowe. This is Viewpoint.